Hello, and welcome to day 22985 for me. It's Sunday, so of course it's time for a sesh, but more than that, it's Sunday, the 10th of November. And it was 23 years ago today that the great Ken Kesey passed on from this world. Sad day in my life for a very sad year. That's a whole different story. Let me tell you this story. Hang on a second. It was 1972. It was January or February, and I remember my mom and I had this practice of every Sunday we would go to the movies. Usually it was just the two of us, and this one particular Sunday we went and saw Paul Newman's latest film. She is just in love with Paul Newman, and it was a movie called Sometimes a Great Notion, and it's about this family called the Stamper family in Oregon. They're loggers, and they're defying the onslaught of commercial logging. They wanted to remain a family-owned, cottage, not cottage, but small business. And, Weyerhaeuser or, whoever it was coming in to take it all over. And so they were like, fuck you to them. And the film was an amazing, amazing film. Very powerful, especially when I was 10, 11 years old, right? And I saw that it based on the novel by Ken Kesey. So I've always been a voracious reader. When I was a kid, I used to read a ton of books, many of them not appropriate for somebody of my age, but I went to the library literally the next day and checked out Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey, and I devoured the whole book like inside of a week, 10 days, which was very fast for me when I was that young. And it was a pretty complex and deep story, but it really affected me. It really, it sparked something inside of me. It spoke to me inside. And I knew nothing about Ken Kesey. I knew nothing about One Who Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. That film had not come out at this time. But and it just speaks to this sense of rebellion, individuality, anti-authoritarianism, that it really stirred something up in me, and I really became fascinated with Ken Kesey. And that's not unusual for me. I was, as a kid, Alexander Dumas, that he was one of my, Mark Twain, he was another, I just, loved. And Kesey was probably one of the first really mature books that I had read. And it was a couple of years later, fast forward, 1974, the summer of 1974, and my uncle took me to my first Grateful Dead concert. It was at that Christmas time or birthday. Somebody gave me a copy of a book by somebody named Tom. The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test was about Ken Kesey and the Merry Pranksters and this bus trip that they took to the World's Fair in New York City in 1964. And they were all hippied out, and, painting and wild clothes, and this fantastic bus called Further. And, it just was a legendary story. Then it occurred to me that the band in the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, the house band, was the Grateful Dead. And then, I became just convinced. Ken Kesey is, it was like probably my first real hero worship that I thought, man, I've got to meet this guy. So in the summer of '80, I took off and I followed the Oregon Trail from Chicagoland all the way out to Oregon. And I didn't find Ken Kesey. I did find Ken Babs, who was his best friend. And to this day, I still, occasionally communicate with Babs. Babs is the one who said to me, keep your dauber up. And that's always stuck with me. And, so it as I grew into a young adult, as I came into my own as a writer and an author, Kesey in the Grateful Dead, the freedom of all that scene, the whole counterculture thing, even though this was all like, the early 80s, by the time it's really coming together for me, really resonated, really struck me as something that was important. It was important to me, of course, but I think it's important in life, American life. Hey, sorry about that. I had to change where the camera was because you were over here and it's kind of like on a little slant and you started to drip over, so I just wanted to move you so that you're a little more stable, so that I appear to be a little more stable. Hybrid sativas. So again, pardon me, it's Sunday. Let's do some session. Talking about how American Ken Kesey is, how American the Grateful Dead experience is. Talking about me, an American, who has pretty much spent my whole life in these here United States. I haven't never gone to Europe. I've never left the Western Hemisphere. But the idea that is truly an American art form. He is truly an American writer. I really feel that the way that stuff shaped my viewpoints in life is something that resonates with a lot of people in the United States. People of my generation, people younger than me, and even people older, the generation that's passing now. the ones that were the artists that brought us this stuff. Phil Lesh just passed. Rest his soul. What a great life he had. But the idea is that these values are as American as any other American values you could point to, that you could cite. So, and Mr. Ken Kesey, through his brilliant work as an author, really sparked this sense of rebellion, this sense of subterfuge around the establishment. Whether it was R.P. McMurphy, rebelling against Nurse Ratched and the system, or whether it was the Stamper family, giving the finger to the big businesses that were taking their ways. Kesey had a way of writing a story that an everyman, person can relate to, a human story. Like Steinbeck or Mark Twain before him. He had a way of capturing that, but then wrapped inside was this rebellious, anti-establishment, funny observation of things, that caused the reader to really think about the issues that Kesey was writing and explaining through the fiction of the story. The stuff that Kesey did really struck a chord at a very young age. And then around that teenage years, when I read the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, and I realized the power of performance art, the power of demonstrating through art, the Merry Pranksters, the idea of the Merry Pranksters, the idea of the intrepid traveler, the sense of freedom that they lived. Not only did he write about it, he had a band of people that thought and looked and appreciated life in the same way, and they all took it out to America in 1964. And things were all crazy then. The Beatles had come here, the British invasion, and kids were starting to run out to California to be go surfing with the Beach Boys, or go to San Francisco with flowers in their hair. And then right as I'm at the precipice of my adult, I connect that the house band at the acid test was the Grateful Dead, and all that tomfoolery, the fuckery, the screwing with people's brains just to get them to think, was embodied in this whole Grateful Dead scene. That's what that was all built on and everything. And I'm recounting all this to you because I've been reflecting. Today's, of course, the day that Kesey passed, and last month it was his birthday. So I've been thinking about it for a month or so now and reread some Kesey. And it occurs to me that what's going on now with the election, however you feel about it, with the environment, with the struggle between those that have way too fucking much and those of us who don't have nearly enough, it occurs to me that anger that I feel, that resentment that I feel, that sadness that I feel can be turned into action through art, through creativity. And maybe it's time for something like the 21st century Merry Pranksters, or some sort of things that you take the absurdity of what's going on, and they can't stop you from laughing about it. They can't deal with humor. They know how to deal with violence. You don't like what's going on and you go out and protest in the streets, you storm the Capitol, whatever. That isn't the way to do it. That they know how to respond to that. They just knock your ass down. They put you in their jails, through their court systems, and you're fucked. But humor, you can't put in jail. Maybe that's a way we can work together. Maybe that's something that we can do individually and as a community, as a troupe, as solos, as just strange little funny acts of defiance. However you view it, it works both ways. Because really, folks, it doesn't matter if you're a fucking Democrat or you're a fucking Republican. When you only have two choices in a system that's obviously rigged for a club that none of us are in, for that 1% out there, for that Leo Leonards and the Koch brothers and the Mark Cuban, for that matter, or the Jeff Bezos. I mean, we can go on and on. Taking the anger, the sadness, the frustration, the disgust, the hope, the joy, the opportunity, the possibilities, all those feelings that were wrapped up in this whole thing for us, one way or the other, said, is that you are not really strong until you can find the fun in any situation. And I know that's a debatable thing to say, and maybe someday we'll do that, but for right now, just consider it. You're not really strong until you can find the fun in anything. Okay. Well, again, I thank you for tuning in. My friend back here, Grateful Dead Ed, thanks you. I'm actually sitting in his seat, so pardon me. And like I like to tell you guys, please take care of you. Take care of yourself. Okay? Before you go taking care of whoever's in your house that you need to take care of, or taking care of what's ever going on at work, or taking care of even the fucking environment. Take care of you. Okay? Because that is paramount. And be safe. These are crazy days. There are some loose nuts out there. And until you get home, be safe. Be safe at home, too. Most people, I think, die at home. And like I always said, like Ken Babs, Ken Kesey's best friend, told me, keep the dollar up.
Sometimes I live in the country. Sometimes I live in town. Sometimes I take a great notion. Gonna jump overboard on the river and drown. Night, Irene, good night.